Hello everyone, I'm Yi Li from National Taiwan University of Science and Technology. Today I will be presenting the results of the study by Professor Tang and me. My subject is how to apply service design thinking to the process of designing an accessibility app, a case study of public transportation for the visually impaired. With the advancement of technology, accessibility apps seem to have mature techniques. However, there is still no technology that can completely solve the difficulties made by the visually impaired when taking public transport. This study takes the iBus program, a public transportation assistance for the visually impaired, as the research case. Based on the iBus case, three related research questions are explored in detail. The first is, when dealing with the service in accessibility apps, what are the challenges faced? The second is, how are the challenges resolved after the service design is introduced? The third is, what is the impact of service design on app design? Three research objectives were formulated based on integration of service design thinking into accessibility app design. The first is difficulties encountered in current accessibility apps. The second is record the practical implementation details and results after the implementation of service design thinking. The third is summarize the method of introducing service design thinking into accessibility apps. In Taiwan, many visually impaired individuals wrote to the media about their negative experience and extremely low operational efficiency. Possible reasons could be difficulties in coordination with the bus driver, the location of the bus stops is unclear. Lastly, government policies have been in place for many years, but they can still not solve the problem, which requires new innovative methods. The most accessed apps for the visually impaired currently are accessibility apps. Several accessibility auxiliary functions are widely used in the built-in operating system of mobile phones, such as VoiceOver for iOS and TalkBack for Android OS, the operation mode of which is shown in figure below. Through literature research, we uncover 5 challenges while using accessibility apps in service, including the heterogeneity of the visually impaired. The writing process spans multiple channels. User feedbacks are challenging to implement efficiently. Results of usability tests decoupling from actual survey value. Risk factors are difficult to identify and track. Service design thinking is used in decision-making and designing solutions to resolve the multifaceted difficulties in the case study. This research summarized 5 features of service design, including emphasize stakeholders, sequence, evidence, holistic view, and realistic. We use the case study method to examine the target project, iBus, for the influence of service design thinking on accessible app design. The iBus case consists of 3 channels: the iBus app, bus telecom system, and the priority boarding area. Let's talk about the iBus booking process. The visually impaired arrives at the priority boarding area and sends a booking notice with iBus app to the bus telecom system. The bus telecom system will later remind the driver to stop at the priority boarding area. The iBus app will notify the visually impaired as the bus approaches the station. Upon boarding the bus, iBus will prompt the visually impaired passenger with the option to notify them when they are reaching their destination. The iBus app offers 5 ways to query buses to meet the different needs of the visually impaired, namely plan route, search, favorite bus, nearby bus stop, and favorite bus stop. iBus app also considers each visually impaired individual's condition when designing the voice and visual interface. The voice interface offers intuitive voice registration. It will promptly notify the user when the interface changes, providing background push notification as well. The visual interface conforms to the visual style of the amblyopia and the color blindness, and uses a car-like design to display the location and the status of the bus. Based on the literature review, this research has identified 5 unique difficulties, each of which hampers the app's effectiveness in the service and increases the likelihood of a project delay or failure. Therefore, This study presents the solution of the iBus program from the viewpoint of service design, demonstrating the outcome of research through design. The figure above illustrates the three major areas of pain point, namely personnel, machine, and environment. The service of iBus span across these three service channels that are interconnected with each other. As this study focuses on app programs, bus telecom systems and the priority boarding area are excluded from the list. Only suggestions around collaborations with apps are included. Let's see how service design can solve this problem. The first challenge while using accessibility apps in service is the heterogeneity of the visually impaired groups. In service design, the goal of the design basis is to identify and clarify the uses and the scope and boundaries of the service subject comprehensively and holistically. Unlike the past, where user journey maps were solely used, the iBus executive team used a persona matrix to classify the visually impaired into groups and identify the heterogeneous factors that affect the service. The researcher using the persona matrix to classify the sense and the personality as the two-quadrant axis to identify the four types of service subjects, namely visually experimenters, auditory experimenters, visually conservatives, and auditory conservatives. The executive team classifies the two quadrants in the matrix distinctively and processes a design concept that ultimately results in the selection of auditory conservatives as the primary development target. The second challenge is the boarding process spans across multiple channels. Traditionally, apps have focused on the interface, demonstrating their logic, using tools such as information architecture and interface flowcharts. A complete service structure is difficult to present when working with external channels. However, using service design visual tools such as Service Blueprint, designers can easily see the connections between front-end and back-end channels, which allows them to see the external connection problems holistically. The iBus executive team generated storyboards to visualize the ideal riding scenario, generating a use case diagram to visualize the coordination of the three channels, and drafted a service blueprint to indicate each channel operating in the order of timeline concretely. This in turn provides team members with multi-angle views, which is helpful for external presentations and meeting an agreement in a short period of time. The third challenge is user feedback is difficult to use effectively. Often, designers spend too much time and money discovering requirements when designing accessibility apps. Consequently, complex and unnecessary functions are added as a result of the inefficient use of resources. Service design emphasizes the relationship between the designer and the service subject, and this is achieved through a flexible development process with the goal of maintaining contact with the service subject at every stage to avoid creating designs that do not meet the requirements. iBus used the three-dimensional service design model to allocate time between three phases: research, design, and file testing, to maximize feedback conversion and avoid overlapping objectives. Furthermore, the executive team used agile iterative methods to speed up the design process. The fourth challenge is decoupling of test results from actual benefits. Traditional app design focuses on the interface's ease of use and usability, and it provides designers with a clear direction for rectifying interface components. However, other factors that need to be considered when launching the product are ignored, which increases the possibility of failure. Service design emphasizes the app as a delivery channel. Besides consolidating the basic ease of use and the functionality, the service performance in a real-world environment should also be considered. When the executive team performs file tests, both the SUS ease of use score and the app's effectiveness from the front-end and back-end standpoint are tested. Finally, with the qualitative feedback, designers can intuitively and comprehensively grasp the app's benefits. The fifth challenge is risk factors are hard to identify and track. Hence, to acquire random variables from the perspective of visually impaired passengers, iBus applied the survey design method and the Wizard of Oz method when conducting contextual inquiries on the visually impaired passengers, while including stockholders in the scope of the study by collecting orientation instructors' teaching experience and the actions of visually impaired individuals. By analyzing the results, the executive team discovered three types of risk factors, namely blind spots in the bus system, distortion caused by the high expectations of the visually impaired, and offline operations variables. To reduce the likelihood of these occurrences, countermeasures were developed. The details are described in the below. Summarize the entire study. This study takes the iBus program as the research subject, exploring the following. The first is role of survey design as problem-solving oriented innovative thinking. The second is how to assist app designers from the standpoint of an app. The third is how to create a holistic view of bus rides for the visually impaired. The fourth is how to overcome the almost insurmountable challenges faced by the traditional accessibility apps. Based on the 5 characteristics of survey design and the practical design process of iBus, this study summarized 5 guidelines that accessibility app designers can refer to and apply when integrating survey design thinking into their design process. Based on the above, 3 contributions are derived from this research. The first is difficulties encountered by designers when designing accessibility apps. In the past, accessibility apps could not effectively improve the service of public transportation. This study summarized 5 difficulties designers had trouble overcoming in the past, outlined their causes, and provide a clear outline of the problem. The second is describe how iBus integrates survey design into its process. Based on the iBus app designer standpoint, the researcher lists the design process and the methods for solving challenging points based on first-hand data records. The design results were detailed and clearly showed how service design can reduce the complexity of accessibility app cases. The third is summarize the principles of service design for integration into accessibility apps. And that concluded my presentation. It's my privilege to be presenting this paper. Thank you very much.